Yesterday, I did a little video here about shame and blame in ministry and shared a quote from Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, where she talks about if shame and blame are your management style or pervasive in your culture of your organization, then we can't expect people to be vulnerable or brave. And that's on page 116. And, as I thought about that in relationship to ministry, there are many of us who would say that, well, blame seems to be a part of the human condition. After all, as a Christian pastor or Jewish or even Muslim, we can point to the book of Genesis and the stories of creation and Adam and Eve in the garden. And when they eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and God talks with them afterwards, what happens? Adam blames Eve, Eve blames the snake, the serpent at that point. And it's, passing the buck, blame starts right away. It seems to be part of the human condition. And we see it in our politics these days. We see it in businesses. We see it in families, the kids when they're arguing, well, you started it, all of that kind of thing. And the blame goes on and on and on. And there's a lot of shame too, that subtle stuff, sometimes not so subtle, that says you're responsible and boy, that's bad. Or shame on you for not doing something, or for not knowing something. And so it seems like shame and blame are a part of us. Sometimes we talk about original sin as either falling from grace, or the other one I've heard more recently and find a little more accurate is reaching up to try to be like God instead of being part of God's creation. But it seems like perhaps shame and blame could be considered part of that original sin because it's right there at the beginning, whenever that started. But that doesn't make it good as a management style. That doesn't make it useful for us. Going into the Christian scriptures, Jesus says, don't be judging others, because when we judge others, we're really judging ourselves. And so every time we blame and shame somebody else for something, we open ourselves up to being blamed and shamed too. What we judge others for, we often find comes back to us as another judgment on us. So shame and blame as a style of ministry, whether it's from the professional faith leader, from the leaders of the board or in the congregation, or as a culture within a faith community of any faith, it's not useful. It doesn't help us demonstrate what we're called to do. And that's to be people who share the message of God's love. And yes, for the people within our community, but to show it to those beyond our community as a way of maybe inviting them in and welcoming them. And if somebody new comes in and visits and they get this feeling of shame and blame, they're not going to want to stay. They're not going to want to be a part of that. It's not a very good form of management. It's not helpful or healthy in a family or in a business. And in that sense, every faith community is a kind of business as well. We're not there for the same purposes as a retail business or some other businesses, but we are a business. And our business is to share the message of God's love and to open that message up to everyone. So I encourage you to take an honest look at yourself, at your faith community, and the culture that's there, and at your own style of management. Is it about judgment? Is it about shame and blaming others for what doesn't go the way you think it should, or when there are mistakes or things don't work out quite right? Is it like, oh boy, blaming somebody, shaming them? And who's going to want to try something new then? We're in a day and an age where ministry is going to have to change because our culture is changing because of COVID and whatever comes out of this. Ministry is changing. And the ones that will have the strongest message are those who will be open to being vulnerable and to being brave and to be sharing that message of God's love in any and every way possible. But that won't include blaming and shaming. So until next time, there is a little bit more to this, because the other part of what Brene Brown talks about is that, when we own our story, we get to write the ending. But when we don't tell the whole story, that includes the failures and the setbacks and the hurts, then we do not get to write the ending. The ending is written for us and about us. She talks about that on page 240. So I'm going to be sharing more about that in some coming videos, so stay tuned for those. And in the meantime, please join me on Aflame Ministry Consulting, AFLAME ministryconsulting.com, or on Facebook, also at Aflame Ministry Consulting. And you'll find more things there, and some other blog posts, some other ideas, some more things to come. So until then, God's peace, and I look forward to hearing from you and to joining you, you joining me the next time around.